Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on how to handle the feeling, the internal climate, if you're feeling stressed, anxious, or blocked. When we talk about these feelings, these are internal states. So these can be precipitated from triggers within, meaning there's not necessarily something in the environment that's causing the feeling of anxiety, meaning that it's really a feeling of being fearful of something that is not present. So even though there's not something in your immediate environment that's triggering this fear, there's something that is cycling within. So that internal climate, what I call your internal real estate, is responsible in the place of healing when we talk about how to handle anxiety, how to handle stress, how to handle feeling blocked. And in the course and context of this channel, I want to discuss a little bit about the cause that creates the effect of these internal states, particularly that of a traumatizing situation. Trauma is defined by a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. It is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So something that has been distressing, disruptive, it's gotten you out of sync. It's gotten you out of alignment. It's gotten you out of your homeostasis or balance. It's something that throws you off. And this can also be known as trauma, psychological trauma, physical trauma, like we see in medicine. Someone who has an injury to their leg is considered a physical trauma. However, there's also psychological trauma, where you've been exposed to a distressing event. And a lot of this is rooted in childhood. If you have extensive anxiety, anxiousness, when nothing around you sort of would insinuate that you should be afraid. So if you have someone at you, yelling, screaming, or be intimidating, you're going to feel fear because there's this automatic response, the fight or flight, which is triggered to self-protect yourself. So there's a threat of either, belonging, that you're not going to belong. There's a feeling of, if it's your caregiver, they're not going to care for you. They're not going to provide the roof. They're not going to provide the food, the clothing. But namely, it's the environment that is conducive to peace and to be able to then focus. And trauma comes from the Greek basically to mean a wound. And so a psychological wound is caused by a distressing or disturbing event. And oftentimes, if you are experiencing, a lot of anxiety, a lot of feeling stuck, blocked, or isolated, and this sort of stress, oftentimes this is rooted and sourced in childhood distressing experiences. And this can be chronic and ongoing, or they can be, selective, meaning you could have a loss of a parent, you could have a loss of a sibling, a loss of your home. All these different situations can be interpreted or received as traumatizing or distressing. So it's an internal subjective experience, and it's also can be connected with something in your environment that's causing the stress, is causing the distress. So oftentimes, if this has happened in childhood, your mind, your brain doesn't have the neurological development. It's not developed enough, mature enough in order to process and handle these emotions and work through them. So that is why we have adults. That's why we have parents, is to help navigate this choppy sea of emotions or distressing events. So you get hit at school, you get, threatened by your sibling. The parent could be also the source of stress. They're drinking, they're stressed out, they're drugging, they don't have their financials together, and or they're chronically unhappy. This can be a source of distress and be traumatizing to a child, and then ongoing if it's been repressed to them in their adult life. So if it's repressed, meaning if in your childhood, if you did not have the space, the forum, opportunity, or experience to express your feelings with someone who is older, who has the maturity to be able to listen and give you eye contact and help you and explain things and work things through and help settle things for you, then that distressing situation is going to continue to recycle and be basically packed in the subconscious mind. So it's going to feel like it's an always there situation. You then might interpret your identity as, I'm always stressed, I'm always worried, I have a lot of anxiety. And nowadays, it's just, if you go to the doctor, they're the ones who are basically, they can just do a couple things, like they can do x-rays, diagnostic tests, MRIs, and prescribe medication, physical therapy, etc. But oftentimes they don't have that talk discussion to help you look at the situations that were the cause of the stress that you're experiencing on a day-to-day. A lot of people then, I can't really point to anything. I don't really know why I feel this way. I just burst out into tears. I don't know why I threw that. They're just, and they are usually distressed by their feeling. They don't like to lose it, lose the cookies. They don't like to lose their composure. They don't like to look bad. They're unhappy. They don't like then the environment or people then who can be around them, even if they're innocent or family people. They get worked up, have anxiety, stress, and emotional blockages. So the wound, if you look at trauma and, kind of chronic anxiety, chronic feelings of stress, depression, isolation, or being blocked, this oftentimes is sort of the nut that is a result of these earlier traumatic or distressing experiences. So as an adult, or wherever you're at in your life, you can kind of look back and reflect back, where was the stressor? Where was the distress? There's healthy stress, like, let's get the table together, we're going to have a, fantastic meal, let's put the, step on the gas here. That's healthy stress. But then there's negative, toxic stress. We can't do anything about this. This, constant complaining, constant criticism, people yelling at each other, people treating each other unfairly, unjustly, things not being, held together through the adults in the family. There is no centralization. Things are just sort of all over the place. That it is chaotic. Oftentimes, if there's then no, protection, or, that wound then continues or is exasperated and can be hit in the same place again and again, triggered from within, even if there's nothing outside. So that's why people might have trouble learning. They have trouble holding down a job. They have trouble with their relationships. Whether this causes narcissism, psychopathy, borderline, it's not the topic of this video. Although, however, there's unequivocally a mind-body connection to the health and then the exposure to stress. And it's, it's not just like there's a flame, you're going to get burned. It's a lot more insidious and really mysterious, how stress can cause a lot of illness, cause the immune system to break down, cause the healthy cells to, to not proliferate at the rate of that they should. And then the thoughts that then continue this cycling and replaying it. So you have to stop the tape. And to look at how to handle the anxiety is understanding that this wound then has created a scar. So a wound, just like, let's use the example of if your knee was injured or you had a knee surgery, there's going to be scar tissue. Anytime, something has been severed or broken, there's going to be scar tissue that is, the healing tissue. And really sort of psychologically, it's a similar thing where it's, made up of a different component. It's not the same. You might have some lumpiness. You might have a physical representation of it. But usually it doesn't have the same nerve endings or sensitivity. Meaning that, when you have a scar, it feels different on your skin. So like if you have a scar on your back, it might feel different than the other side of the back. So, excuse me. So, usually there's this sort of rigidity, inflexibility or feeling stuck when you're in the presence of a scar, not knowing how to move forward, not feeling what you're interested in, not knowing what your next move is, not knowing what your strengths are, a feeling of sort of just being, analysis, paralysis, trying to overanalyze things and figure things out there versus understanding what's going on in here. Not a lot of discussion topics, certainly a lot of growing amount of discussion in this area. But I think it's important to understand the cause of anxiety. And oftentimes, the cause of perpetual and chronic anxiety, which also can lead you to be attracted to those individuals who either take advantage of or perpetuate that anxiety, meaning they have a tendency to repeat the same distress, repeat the same ignoring, repeat the same fighting or lack of approval or lack of connection. In other words, it's reflecting a previous experience. So let's circle back when we're talking about childhood trauma. And there's usually then a severing of the relationship, meaning a attachment. The number one relationship to a child is to that of their caregivers. Period. End of story. They're the ones who tuck them in at night, keep the heat on, keep the lights on, keep the phone, the TV, who keep the food coming. You better get along with them. Otherwise, you could find yourself 6 years old and not knowing how to cook, pay the bills, etc. So children need their parents. They need their parents to be able to be there, not only to feed and clothe and shelter them, but also to give them attention, affection, and guidance, emotional guidance, physical guidance, helping them to stay focused versus being distracted and distressed, or being distracted by the distress. But what happens if the parents are actually causing the trauma? What happens if the parents are actually causing the wound? They're causing the distress. They're causing the hurt. And the child then has to repress, push down, swallow their feelings, and pretend, they don't have oftentimes a forum then to be able to discuss these feelings of being afraid, fearful, not being protected, or, crying, having a tantrum or whatever it is, because they can't work through their emotions. The system is not ready. It's like having, an engine that's missing, some parts. It might turn on, but it might not go if the drive stick shift is not working. So children, they don't have all the working parts together as of yet. They can't put it into drive and follow the speed limit because they don't have all the parts. They don't have the stick shift. They don't have the steering wheel yet. They might have the engine and they might have a little bit of gas, but they don't really know, how to drive the vehicle. They don't know how to, i.e. navigate their own emotions and feelings without the assistance of a parent. And if the parent themselves is dysfunctional, has mental health issues, has not come to terms with managing their own emotions, then they cannot help protect and work through that of their children. And so, oftentimes, you've got, a lot of then physical discipline, emotional discipline, criticism, you bad, and then imprinting all this negativity within the child that's then running their system like a hard drive to a computer. And so they basically have running, you're a terrible person, you're too needy, you're too much, and they're just reflecting back and invalidating the child. And it just reflects back to a story that a friend recently shared with me about Muhammad Ali, who's like a world champion fighter, boxer, what have you. But he was telling me that he hired a coach for $1 million a year just to tell him, you are the champion, you are the best, who just kept shouting that at him. You are the champion, you are the best. You are the champion, you are the best. And I want to feed that message to you now. You are the champion. You are the best. You are number one, and you are what's number one important. And I want you to understand that in the context of your internal environment while we continue this discussion. So oftentimes the feeling of anxiety, stress, and being isolated or being stuck or having sort of blocks, not being able to live the life that you want, harkens back to a cause that is established, started, and as a seedling in childhood or early life. So it's important that you come clean. Maybe you couldn't discuss that with the wounding people. Hey, you really messed me up. This really, I could not take advantage of life because of this. I did not really get what I needed because of this. I've had troubles in my life because of this. This has caused, a lot of, distraction or, issues in my life that I haven't been able to focus on really my needs in a healthy manner and have healthy functioning relationships. I haven't been able to focus on studies. I haven't been able to focus on work. My comprehension, whatever issues that you feel you're suffering from, especially when it comes to those mental processes, can very much be disturbed and distressed if you're around, those stressors, which then, preside over your needs. And so you have to understand there's a psychological process called repression. Freud originally, discussed this in his book, in his primer, but meaning pushing it down, meaning I need to help assistance with this. I need help managing my feelings. I need help learning how to do my homework. And the parent just goes, figure it out yourself, kid. You think you got stress, try this, So they're basically just 1-upping you, 10-upping you, 100-upping you, meaning you're left to your own resources. You've got the vehicle, it doesn't have a steering wheel. It doesn't have, any starter, but you better learn to drive it and you better learn to navigate it. So it's like trying to drive a vehicle without having all the parts. That's what trauma. And so that's why anxiety, this is not going to work. This is going to fall apart. People aren't going to like this. It's not going to stay together. So this anxiety is also fueled if you don't have the resiliency of a good support network. So, or, belonging, meaning I can just be with these people and they don't have a big hang up. They don't have a big issue. They're not trying to criticize me. They can allow me to just be as I am. They're not trying to change, fix, restore, persuade, distract, or whatever. You can just be with them. And so that feeling of belonging or community or connection is paramount, number one, important. So anxiety will also oftentimes stem if you did not experience that early on during some very crucial developmental stages. It's part of child development to be able to feel that. It's only normal, it's only natural. But a lot of people, I think, who are viewers on the channel, feel that they are suffering from a lot of anxiety, stress, and being blocked because they didn't have this foundational sense of belonging, that begins in the family unit and then extends itself to life as a macrocosm. So the family unit, in the early childhood is like the microcosm where you feel a sense of belonging, connection, worth, meaning, being able to focus and be present. And you need the adults, but if the adults shame you for needing them, which is their job, they're basically like saying, I'm punched out. I work 9 to 5, and kid, if you're at school, I'm punched out. You got to go find someone else. I don't work here right now. I'm off the clock. So if you had parents who could not attend to your needs and connect and establish and discuss and have that open communication, but told you to put up and shut up, there's starving people here, all these different things that made you repress your feelings, they didn't work through it. They just basically did not deal. So now it's within you to recognize the cause that's created this effect of the anxiety. And oftentimes It's based on that inner sense of belonging and safety and connection and community and, being accepted versus rejected. And a lot of that has not just a physical component, but it has that internal emotional component, meaning I feel, I am, I perceive, I am aware. And especially then if you're around a lot of people, if yourself have a lot of empathy, which means then you feel other people's feelings, then in other words, first, meaning you have a pickup mechanism. People have wiring, which are the mirror neurons, which then, are just part of, being a human. So you can go and check out at, and get your turkey or get your groceries, and the person checking out might be really cool, calm, relaxed. They might be stressed. You can pick up the feelings. That's your empathy neuron. So you might not vocalize it, but you might say, that person seems stressed, anxious, whatever, or that person's cool, calm, collected. You don't verbalize it, but subconsciously, your mirror neurons are picking that up and making that assessment. And it's not going to be life changing whether the person who checks you out is, this, that, or the other. For some people it might, but, it's not really, life changing. But I'm just trying to give you an example of what your empathy neurons are like in your everyday existence. And so then if you then are of this predisposition of empathy, and you have empathy, then you're feeling other people's feelings and not your own. You're then aware of their stress, their deficits, their needs, and not your own. So even as a child, to be instilled and imprinted with this, it becomes a real recipe for, a really complex, multi-layered creation, if you will. If you are sensitive to these things and are putting others first all the time. In other words, it becomes a substitute for satisfying your own needs. It becomes a substitute for being yourself. It becomes a substitute for being able to grow within your own body and as your own person and being able to be free and liberated. You're always tilted by their biases, tilted by their stresses. You're always putting them first. You're not really living in your own body because it's so uncomfortable. And then this is also called codependence, where other people's needs drive your own life, not your own needs. It's always, giving them the best. I think this would be great for them. Giving this, always taking care of others. And then meanwhile, people feel empty and then they wonder why they haven't received, like in return, because they're so into or obsessed or convinced that they need to take care of others. So this can also be a result of the trauma. And I think it's very interesting to note that a child, when they go through this, it's not a choice. A children doesn't have a choice to say, you know what, this and this, occurred to cause the trauma, and I'm now going to go talk to a teacher right now. I mean, they don't have an alternate. They don't have, someone to give them a new house, a new family. So it's an automatic process to they then repress and put up and they can become very unhappy, isolated, and then they're not able to focus, learning disabilities. Now more than ever, attention deficit disorder and anxiety and obesity in children is like through the roof. All these different things, more autism is on the rise, diabetes, ADHD and anxiety. Many young people are being prescribed all sorts of medication, Ritalin, antidepressant, in their teens. So it's a reflective, it's a new situation that's arising within society. And so then you see all this medication being prescribed, these become billion-dollar businesses, and it becomes just how things are, it becomes the new normal. But you need to kind of understand the cause that creates this effect of this anxiety, not being able to sleep, not being able to eat, etc. And so realize that, this trauma, it was not a choice. You had to automatically, it's an automatic process. It's part of your fight or flight. It's part of your nervous system. This is how you're wired. This is what you possess. So what I want to make the message in this video to you is that you possess this temperature gauge. You possess this nervous system. The nervous system is not contained in other people's bodies. You have this very high level complex nervous system that has all sorts of different functions and purposes and features and benefits that you might not even be aware of. So you really need to get clued in and tuned in to the fact and turned on to the fact that you now, of course as an adult, possess your own central nervous system. You have a say as to what to go and what's not a go. You have the choice. You have the ownership. You have the control panel. You have the navigation. You have the vision for how you want things to be laid out moving forward. And to realize, what does the scar feel like? What does it feel like within you? Does it feel like you can't talk? Does it feel like you can't laugh? Does it feel like you can't move? Does it feel like you can't eat? Does it feel like you have to stuff yourself and engorge yourself to your 700 pounds? What does the scar, make you want to do that's sort of, overlaying the wound? Understand what the wound was caused by and why your body, subconscious and everything that's, involved react and respond. So your physical body had to respond in this manner, by isolating, by being sad, by running away, whatever you had to do. That was your body responding to a negative element, a negative stressor. So don't feel that you are weak, inadequate, less than, stupid, never have a shot at life because of this. This is part of the human condition. You are not alone. There are tons and tons and tons and millions of people who have experienced this. I mean, this is just how it is. I mean, and it's ongoing. But you can pick up yourself, by your own shoulders. Pick yourself up by your shoulders. I've got you. I've got you. Give yourself a hug. Really hold on to you. Get to know and look at yourself. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I say pull yourself up by the shoulders and just lift up like this. I've got you. Say that to yourself and really have a hands-on approach with yourself, especially if you didn't have a lot of hands-on attention earlier. So with the time here, so it's okay to own up to your own reality. I think that's if there's a lot of repression, people are not able to own up to their own reality. It is too threatening. It's too scary. It's the post-traumatic stress syndrome. It's like the people who have had horrific situations occur to them. I mean, we could go on, but it's controversial. And I think when I'm talking about the horrific things that can happen to children, girls, etc. All sorts of people in today's society are experiencing this. It's just too intense. So these situations, albeit very intense for you, are oftentimes repressed because they are so threatening. They're so, a matter of life or death, or really, I want to say like survival or not survival. So the child then learns just to survive. What do I need to do to just survive? Just to get from A to B. And then maybe I'll get from B to C. They just don't even know. They have so much uncertainty. If there's this trauma bond and without their needs getting met, they just have to hang in there. So, realizing then that understanding and owning your reality means saying, this happened, and, it nearly cost me. And it doesn't mean that you're weak, inferior, unlovable. It's more a reflection of, the other elements. And if this was your parents or, your early teenage lover or, teenage love interest or significant other, whoever the significant, maybe it was at your school or at your first job, or maybe as an older adult in your 20s and 30s where a lot of this happened, that's kind of creating this anxiety. Since that, it's important to be able to look at it now from a safe standpoint and go, whoa, I'm owning this experience. This happened. This is not, I'm not crying wolf. I'm not making this up. I'm not overreacting. I'm owning my needs. This is a normal human situation and a human right. And a lot of these are not just the physical. We're talking about the emotional and psychological and spiritual. You are not just a rag doll. You have more going on than just the muscles, and the bones. You've got a lot, your heart center, which I feel, drives a lot, follow your heart. So it's to understand also that that's the cause of addiction. It's a cause of bad habits. People who are anxious, they're biting their nails down. People who are anxious, they're fidgety. They smoke. They drink. They eat compulsively to manage their feelings. And oftentimes it's the habit that's causing the pain, and so they continue the pain cycle. So realize, that this is what happened. And then oftentimes the trauma bond then is not an attachment. So there's healthy relationship attachment, which means I can have a relationship with you. I can be loyal. I'm not threatened. We understand each other. That's a relationship. But a trauma bond is more where they're holding you down under their thumb and to control and overpower you and disempower you in a trauma bond. So it's important to kind of understand and evaluate on yourself on a spectrum basis. Where are you at, and how are your current relationships a reflection of that internal state? Am I lacking a lot of relationships because of anxiety? Am I lacking happiness because I've numbed myself out? Am I stunting my growth because I'm blocked and I'm just basically staying in that repressed, stifled state? So look at and I know as we get towards the end of the year, it's an important time too, as people kind of reflect back and say, where have I come this year? What have I done? So it's important to have kind of like in the privacy of these videos, an opportunity to look at those things and understand, where you're at, and then, but come into a peaceful body within, coming back and having moments of safety. Having moments of non-anxiety. And why is this so difficult? Maybe because someone didn't allow that state in you. So it feels, it can't be real. Peace can't be real. Security can't be real. Happiness can't be real. And so you basically disown these states because of what happened. And so, you might then see others that they seem happy. Look at that couple. Look at that house. Look at their job. Why are they happy and not me? Well, realize that a lot of that blockage is due